Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to RISmedia's Content Solutions Best Broker Practice webinar series. I'm Verl Workman. I'll be your host today, and I want to thank you all for being here. We have an incredible program today with some of my favorite people on the call, and I'll get to that in just a minute. I'm Verl Workman, founder and CEO of Workman Success Systems. We coach and train the elite teams in North America, and it's always an honor to work with the elite. And doing these webinars with RISMedia gives me the ability to really find out what people are doing, how they're doing it well, and then apply those to our businesses and our coaching programs. And I know that we get so many comments from you as we do these webinars, the things that you learn and the practices that you hear and the systems that you discover, and we want to continue to offer great value. During the webinar itself, we're not going to unmute anybody because it makes it very difficult to have a clean recording. So if you have questions during the webinar, I encourage you to use the questions button. Just click on the questions button and you can type your questions in. We'll be monitoring those questions, and there will be time during the webinar where we will be able to answer as many questions as we can get to. We have a lot of information to share with you today on branding that I think you're going to find very helpful. Next is, I'd like you to remind everybody to always stay till the end of the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we always have valuable information that we make available. Our guests today have provided some really cool content that will help you in your branding strategies, and we'll give you a specific link where you can download that content and information. So make sure you stay till the very end. As always, we have great partners that are involved with these Best Broker Practices webinars, and we're very, very fortunate to have as a partner on this call Bill Yaman with Imprev. Now, I've known Imprev for a long time, almost probably since they started in business. I've been friends with Imprev, and they've done just a phenomenal job at creating messaging and branding and marketing tools for the elite. They literally provide services for over 250,000 agents, and they run the back offices of some of the most powerful real estate brands. And Bill, it's exciting to have you here as a president and chief revenue officer. Thanks for being part of the webinar today.
Oh, Verl, thanks very much for having me. Excited about the content that we're getting ready to talk about here this morning and this afternoon.
Well, I'm a big fan of Imprev, and I always have been. Is there anything exciting that Imprev is up to these days? What's new on the horizon with Imprev?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Verl. Yeah, as we think about the content we're about to see, I think of Imprev as the brand enabler. We're going to enable the brokers on this call really to deliver on their brand promise in really three core areas. One is a full marketing center that gives agents the ability to easily build world-class marketing content to reinforce brand across really every customer impression, whether that's print, whether that's digital, or whether that's social media. We've also been focusing in the last couple of years on automation, and very specifically marketing automation for listings that puts the control of marketing new listings back in the hands of the brokerage and the broker without requiring agents to lift a finger. So doing that on their behalf. And then finally, the third area, again, very germane to what we're going to talk about this today, is lead and customer nurturing that keeps your brand in front of an agent's target audience in a really meaningful way, again, in a completely automated fashion. So excited to talk about the content and excited how we can enable some of the folks on the call to really reinforce and enable that brand.
I love that. When I think of Imprev, I often think of one of my favorite sales guys is Ron Popeil, and he talks about the chicken roaster, and all you got to do is set it and forget it. And that's a lot of what Imprev does, is they create tools that allow you to just set it and forget it.
That's great. Never been compared to Ron Popeil before, but I like the analogy.
It's a huge compliment. He's like, he's one of my favorite sales guys. For those of you joining the call right now, welcome to RISMedia's Broker Webinar Series. I'm really excited to introduce not only a great branding and marketing expert, but also a good friend. Robert Allan Paul is joining us. He's the founder and president of a massive company called Company of One, and he's been over 30 years. I love the way that sounded. He's been 30 years in marketing and branding. I met Robert Paul many years ago. I was doing a seminar for RE/MAX North Central region, and Robert was the account representative for the marketing company, doing all of their massive spend, dealing with all of their online, offline, billboard advertising with the ad dollars that the entire region was using. And he was doing a presentation to the agents on how to capitalize on the co-brand, and I was mesmerized by how strategic he thought through all the aspects of building a brand and borrowing brand equity. And we became friends, and he's been just a great mentor to me, and also been involved in pretty much every company I've ever owned and been involved with in the brand strategy. He's an author, he's a consultant, he's a licensed real estate agent selling and listing in Minneapolis, and just an all-around really great guy. Robert, thank you so much for agreeing to do this webinar with us. I'm really happy to have you here.
It is my pleasure. I am delighted, and I appreciate the invitation.
As we're kind of cranking through this webinar today, and we're talking about branding and this Boomerang branding concept, I asked Robert if he would invite one of his clients or someone he's worked with their brand strategy to share some insights of the application of some of the things he's going to talk about. And he invited a mutual friend, Cleve Gaddis. Cleve Gaddis is the managing partner of Gaddis Partners at RE/MAX Center in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also one of our real estate coaches that coaches only brokers and owners who run teams, has 27 years in real estate. But none of the stuff that's on the screen is what I love most about Cleve. What I love most about Cleve is how much he loves his family and what a good man he is. He's a man of high integrity. He does things right, or he doesn't do them. And my second favorite thing about Cleve is he used to sell vacuums. And how do you not love a guy that knows how to sell vacuums? Cleve, welcome, and I'm glad you're here with us today.
Glad to be here.
So, Robert, let's jump right in and talk about the whole concept of Boomerang branding. Is that an Australian term?
No, in fact, I wish I could take credit for the title of the seminar. I think that might have been somebody else's idea, but I love it because the entire concept really focuses not so much on, new lead generation and new prospects. Not that this doesn't apply to that, because it absolutely does, but it gives us a chance to really focus on clients that you have now, people that you're working with, people that you've worked with in the past, and figure out how do you leverage those relationships and make those connections so that you have more customer loyalty, so that you can drive more client referrals. How do you get people to keep coming back, especially in a world where they may not personally need you again for another 5 or 6 years? Sarah Goldie, another coach at Workman Success Systems, wrote a blog a couple of weeks ago about clients for life, the idea that the average American moves about 11 or 12 times during the course of their lives. And let's say only 5 or 6 of those are as an adult, they're before they become home buying age. That's still, let's say, 10 transactions. And if your average commission is only $6,000, that's a lifetime value of $60,000 from one client, from one person. Okay, not counting all the people that they could refer to you. And yet we very often just let those clients kind of wander off and end up handing that to somebody else. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some really key branding principles. We're going to talk about vision and core competencies and attributes and promise. And by the way, the first couple, 3 of those aren't really for other people. They're really for you. If you're a broker, if you're a team leader, if you're an owner, you set the tone for your organization. And a lot of it comes down to what do you want for that company and what's important around here. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to move on to things that actually help you build positioning that will really mean something to the people that you're talking to, that will really resonate with your best prospects and make you the provider of choice. All right. Then we're going to take what we've learned in that first 15 or 20 minutes, and by the way, it's only going to be about 15 or 20 minutes, and we are going to fly through this. This is speed branding. This is short attention span theater. So if you wander off and check your email for 5 minutes, you may come back and find yourself a little lost. But once we've gone through this, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to show you how to apply what you have developed and how to make this in practice a useful tool. How do you build brand positioning and identity that you can put into all your marketing tools, all your strategies, all your tactics, all the resources that you have at your disposal? So, with that in mind, let's go ahead. Let's start with simply what's a brand. Okay? How would you define it? It really comes down to one thing. All you've got to do is answer that question, who are you? It begins with a name. All right, and if we were cowboys in the Old West, a brand is nothing more than a way for me to tell my cows from your cows. That's the origin of the term. It still works today. If you look at those logos, you recognize them. You've got McDonald's and Nike and Mercedes-Benz. But those aren't brands. Those are icons. Those are logos. Okay, McDonald's, that name is the brand. Okay, everything else, your logo, which is what many, many people always want to talk about. I'll get people call and say, we need to talk about our branding, and by the way, what we need is we need a logo. Well, a logo is really nothing more than an icon. It's nothing more than an accessory. It's an accoutrement. It's a signet ring. Okay, it's a signature, and that's really great, but it's about the last thing that we usually talk about. We have to take a look at kind of the difference between branding and marketing. You know, marketing, early in my career, someone said is fairly simple. Marketing is nothing more than asking people what they want and then figuring out how to give it to them. Marketing is called marketing because it's about the market. Branding, on the other hand, is called branding because it's about the brand. Branding is really about you. And what makes branding difficult, it's not complicated, but it's hard because branding forces you to really think about yourself as an individual or as an organization in ways that you're just not used to thinking about yourself. And branding is the process of actually helping consumers and customers attach some meaning to that name. And a logo might help, but there's a whole lot of other homework that kind of goes into it in order to get to that point so that you can start making some real connections with your consumer. So let's talk about the first ones. Okay. By the way, the reason this matters, the reason all this stuff matters, is because branding and the effects of branding are how we tend to choose our partners. It's how we decide who we're going to do business with. Because whether you are a broker or a team leader or an agent or something else, there is going to be a moment when you are sitting across the table from that prospect and they are all going to ask the exact same question, which is, Verl, click that button, why you? Why you? What do you say? You can't just point to your logo. You can show them your website, but nobody's ever going to sign on the bottom line or choose to do business with you because of your logo. We have to figure out what to say. And most of the time we don't know how to talk about ourselves beyond being number one or counting out, the number of years of experience that we have. We know we're supposed to have an elevator pitch, but most of us don't actually have one because it seems like it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really complicated, but it's not. There's a process, and we're going to go through it right now in about 15 minutes. So 15, 20 minutes from now, you'll know what you have to do to figure out what to say, and it all starts with vision. And I want to start calling on my friend and, in a way, my mentor, Cleve Gaddis here, because I enjoyed working with Cleve a 3 years ago as he was, he's had enormous success long before we ever met. But they were looking at kind of re-engineering their brand. And I think together he and I have developed some principles and we have learned some things. And one of the things that I learned from Cleve is that as a broker, as an owner, as a team leader, your primary job is to provide vision. Your job is to point to a spot on the horizon and say, that's where we're going. So that everybody on the bus, first of all, knows if they want to be on the bus, and they get an idea of the direction you are trying to take the company and the team and the organization and what the ultimate goal is. And vision really breaks down into two things. You've got mission, which is what you want for your company, and there's purpose, which is kind of a broader version of that, or what a lot of marketing people call your brand ideal, which is what do you really want for your customer? What do you want for your client? So let's take a look at that first one. If you flip the page, Lifetime Fitness is in about 70 markets across the country. A number of years ago in the mid-90s, I was the first marketing director they ever hired. And the week before I started, they had a big executive team meeting because they wanted a mission. And they came back with this big, long, kind of complicated, sprawling mission statement, which is a mouthful. And everybody had to learn it before they could get their next paycheck. Now, to be fair, Lifetime Fitness is a fabulous company, and by most accounts, they definitely live up to this mission. But the irony is, the whole reason they developed this mission statement was we wanted to be the Ritz-Carlton of health and fitness. Do you know what the mission statement of the Ritz-Carlton organization is? Go ahead and show them, Verl. Delight the customer. Delight the customer. Okay. The maid at the Ritz-Carlton every night when she is riding home on the bus can ask herself if she did anything to delight the customer. Your mission or mission statement is not a map. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know about all the routes you'll be taking and how you're going to get there and milestones along the way. Your mission is really meant to be a very simple ideal. It's a compass that lets you know if you're on track or if you're veering off course. And so when Cleve and I were working together, he developed the following. Do you want to talk about that, Cleve?
Absolutely. And for those who are listening and are thinking, okay, now all this branding stuff it sounds really great, but how do I really apply this in my own business? Because really, I mean, I looked at the real estate business for the first 12 or 14 years I was in it is, hey, look, I find people that want to buy houses, and I sort of get in the middle of that transaction and I help them buy a house, and ultimately when it closes I get a fee for doing that. The issue is that if you don't have something that speaks to the public in terms of who you are, then you're missing a wonderful opportunity to attract people who are looking for the same exact thing you have. And I'll give you this analogy, and good branding is like saying to someone, hey, I'm the real estate agent who provides strawberry ice cream every time I see you during the entire process. Now, you wouldn't want that to be your brand, but I happen to like strawberry ice cream. So the truth of the matter is, if, Robert, you said to me, hey, you can work with me and I'll give you strawberry ice cream every time, you can sign me up because I like that. So I know what you offer, and I know whether or not I like that. So as we started through the process, it was very difficult for me to understand why I needed to put these things in place. And as we looked at our mission, I wanted our mission to sort of be accomplishment-oriented. And it's really these mission statements for me are internal, so it's only me and my administrative staff and my team agents that really work with this mission statement. But our mission is to help at least 1,000 clients benefit from our services every year by 2020. So it's really just a sexy way of saying we want to close 1,000 deals a year 4 years from now.
Cool. So the question becomes, well, how do you do that? What is the process? Can you talk a little bit about how you developed this mission statement?
Absolutely. So think about mission being the equivalent of if you're trying to cross a mountain range, so you've got 3 or 4 rows of mountains, you're sort of describing the first mountain that you intend to cross the peak. So it's really where you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the things that people do, Robert, as they get started is they think that everything they do needs to be absolutely perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be there. It needs to be specific. You need to have some sort of mission for you and everybody on your team to focus on. Gives you a good place to focus. If you're going to set up your mission, you can do it in several different ways. You can either use targeting, which is what I chose to use, where I set a very specific, well-defined goal at which everybody can take aim, or you can use the common enemy approach. So if in your local market you were the number 2 provider of real estate services, you could certainly have your goal to be to surpass the number 1 servicer, to basically to defeat them. And then some people, although it's unusual to do that in the real estate world, will use the role model process in determining how to set up their mission, which is where you choose some type of organization that you admire and use them as an example of who or what you want to become.
I hear that a lot with people comparing their business to being I'm like a Google or an eBay, or I want to have customer service like Nordstrom. That's an example of that.
And that'd be a good way to apply that. For example, of the three, Nordstrom type customer service. I'm pretty sure Nordstrom wouldn't like you using their name in all of your branding, but I mean that's a great example. And people know what that means. So if you give customer service like Nordstrom's, or you give customer service, I'm just going to say as an example, like Walmart, people know the difference in those two things. They can relate to it instantly, and if they like Nordstrom's service, they're going to be attracted to you immediately.
Well said.
Okay. And can you guys hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Okay, great. I just took a moment to switch my my source. So you go from mission and you move on to purpose. And as I said, a lot of marketings will refer to your purpose as your brand ideal, which really comes down to what do you really want for your customers? How do you develop a more global version of that mission in terms of what your best clients can start to expect from you, and what that mission might be? Some good examples. If you flip the page, as Cleve pointed out to me the other day, you look at Uber, which has been extremely successful already. Their real purpose is to evolve the way that the world moves. If you take a look at Microsoft, one of the most, successful companies ever, pretty highfalutin purpose, but it is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And so, Cleve, if we could talk for a minute about how you took your mission and made it more relevant to your customers.
So in our business, we have two programs that we use that are designed to attract sellers and buyers. And one is called the Sure Home Selling System, S-U-R-E, Home Selling System. And another is called the Sure Home Buying System. And our whole process, everything we live for on a daily basis, all of that my agents think about all the time is connecting with people who want to be the best educated parties in the transactions in which they participate. So what we tell people is that we will put people in a position to be sure about the decisions they make because we will ensure they're the best educated party. And we say it 100 times a day. And so our purpose, and a purpose statement, and Robert, you touched on this, but a purpose statement is supposed to be something like that North Star, something that will guide you, but something that you can really never reach. And so our purpose is to ensure fully enlightened home sellers and buyers. It's something that really you could never do. I can't, if you give me 100 buyer or seller clients, I can't get all 100 of them to pay attention to me during the entire process. So I can't possibly ensure that everybody is fully enlightened about the process, but I can always try. And that's the key, is that purpose statement is something that you're always striving for. It can be huge if you have the right statement for your organization.
Awesome.
Some great information.
And how do you do that?
Yeah, well, so some great information, and most of what I got about defining purpose, core values, and mission, I got out of the book Beyond Entrepreneurship. So do yourself a favor, order that. You can get it on Amazon. It's written by Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. And he says your purpose is your team's reasons for existence. Again, something that's unattainable but appropriate to shoot for, and like we talked about, like the North Star. I have never read anything that gave such a clear definition for how to set up your branding and mission and vision and purpose statements as that chapter 2 specifically in Beyond Entrepreneurship. So what you want to do is start thinking about who you are. So one thing that I learned 4 or 5 years ago that was kind of a hard thing for me to learn is that it's really the things that are strange about me. It's my weaknesses, it's my flaws that ultimately make me unique. It's not just my strengths. And so ultimately, as I grew up, my dad was a CPA. I knew that ultimately the only way to really impress him and to get him to say good things about me was to know more about things and to be really smart and well educated. And so unfortunately, I'm a Mr. Know-it-all. I always want to learn and know and do and all that kind of stuff. And so what I decided to do is take what in my situation is a fairly significant personality flaw, because I always have to know everything, and turn it into a business model. So don't be afraid to take things that are a little strange about you and turn them into a business model, because you might be surprised how many people you'll connect with when you show them you're a little bit vulnerable anyway and how you got there. So again, the purpose statements, it's got to be so strong that it attracts the people you're really trying to attract, but almost repels people that aren't interested. So if, for example, you have a purpose statement which is to make sure people are fully educated, that's not going to appeal to somebody who wants a discount or a rebate on a commission. So it almost runs those types of people off while it attracts the people who are most interested in what you have to offer to you.
Excellent.
I've never actually thought about my purpose statement being to repel potential prospects who don't understand my purpose. That's kind of a different paradigm.
Well, when you think about it,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in the luxury market, you know, those who have a lot of experience in the luxury market know that when you get houses that are 2, 3, 4, 5 million, you better sell what you've got so hard that somebody who's not interested in what you have won't even take the time to call you and ask you a question, because if not, you'll never find a buyer. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Verl, you have very specific things that you're all about in life, and the truth is you attract people to those whether you're purposefully communicating that to them or not. So you might as well just come up with a good, quick, concise statement, and bam, just hit people over the head with it, especially the people who want to join your organization.
I love that. Robert, you had a thought on that as well.
Well, no, absolutely, and I think it ties into the next thing, which really comes down to values. You know, we've often said that great marketing isn't about going out and finding the right customers. It's about helping the right customers find you. And I think part of this process, you know, even just over the next 20, 30 minutes, you start to think about not only who you really want to do business with, but you also start to identify the people that you don't, people who are not right for you. You know, and that's kind of what brand values comes around to, which is, what do you care about as an organization, as a person, as an agent, as a leader? What makes you tick? What drives you? What is guiding those everyday decisions? You know, what's really important around here? And I think where it becomes very challenging is in trying to avoid all of those common cliche terms, you know, that everybody else uses. You know, I try to stay away from things like professionalism and creativity. Those tend to be kind of vague. You know, integrity is another one of them. And what does that really mean? Because if you're talking about, you know, doing what you say, that's more commitment. If you're talking about, you know, doing things even though it might be hard or there could be consequences, that's more courage than it is, you know, integrity. And so as we started working together, you know, with Cleve, he was amazingly good when it came down to coming up with terms that meant exactly, okay, what he was trying to say, like this one. So, and can you talk about that, Cleve? Are you there? Okay. So what Cleve might be changing his audio right now, but when we looked at, you know, the values for Gaddis partners, Cleve developed 6 or 7. One of them is perspective, you know, which is the ability to discern the true nature of an issue. You can read what is on the screen, but he wound up with 6 or 7 that don't really sound like anybody else, but make it very clear, you know, what that organization is all about and what you can expect from them. And it also goes for when he recruits team members to be able to say, this is what we care about. And if that sounds like the kind of organization you'd like to be part of, you know, then we're the organization for you.
Robert, sorry, it's Cleve. My audio connection went down, so I had to get off my headset and dial in on the phone.
No problem at all. No problem at all. And we just covered the idea of perspective, you know, and the ways that we develop kind of the brand values that are important to you. But you kind of want to go down the checklist?
Well, you know, real quickly, the perspective fits into our core values because our core values we defined as respect, wisdom, partnership, perspective, courage, and performance. And most everybody on my team knows exactly what those mean and how to apply them. But here's what we did, Verl, if you want to go to the next slide. It's a real simple process. You need to do it together as a group with at least your management team, although it looks like my webinar's frozen, so I can't tell, Verl, which slide you're on. So I hope you're on the right one.
I'm on make a list of the values and define them.
Perfect. That's perfect. Sorry, I must be having internet connections. So it's real simple. Get together with your key team members and just start having everybody spit out all of the values they feel define you or the team. You're going to include everything that pops in your mind. You know, we want to be intelligent, we want to be insightful, we want to be professional, we want to be honest, we want to have integrity, we want to have fun, We want to value family, all these types of things. And then take that list and just categorize it by putting the similar terms together. So honesty and integrity might, for example, go into, we put those in our core value of respect, because we respect others, therefore we're honest with them, therefore there's no gap between what we say and what we do. And then number 4, you'll actually create your final list. Don't be paralyzed by perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be some cool guiding principles that your organization can use to judge themselves and their performance based on the priorities of the organization. And then get out your thesaurus and find more interesting and specific synonyms, or you can do like I do, and I write it all in simple, plain English that sounds like great, good redneck Southern grammar, and I send it up to Robert Allen Paul, and I let him spice it all up and send it back to me, and it makes me seem extremely intelligent. And then acronyms are extremely useful. I know, Verl, you've got several clients who, have SMART goals or whatever they wind up being, and it's just a way for the team to remember what the core values are. And you can hire to your core values, you can fire to your core values, you can discipline to your core values. When somebody is not performing correctly, you reference it back to the core values, and it becomes very, very powerful.
Yeah, take us through your step-by-step guide of.
Oh, thank you. And I'm sorry, Verl, I have no idea. I have no idea what's on the screen, so I apologize. We've got something, and I think, Verl, it's available for everybody as free downloads after the call. I'm sure you'll tell them exactly how to do that. But we have 2 things. We have, number 1, the Workman Success Systems establishing core values, the step-by-step process for exactly how you do that. And then number 2, you have my purpose, mission, and core value statement, so you can see it from my business. Now, on anything I do, unfortunately, I tend to overdo it. I tend to overcomplicate it. I've already told you it's one of my personality flaws. And so yours you don't need to have as much written on the piece of paper as I have on mine. The simple thing is, what are our core values, and are we meeting those core values on a daily basis? This can be one of the single biggest game changers in your organization if you'll do this and do it correctly.
I love it, and thank you for sharing. And I'll give a link at the end of the webinar where you can download that and get a copy of those for free. So talk about the brand values, Robert.
Okay. Well, just to wrap up the brand value thing, if you're having trouble getting started, some really simple questions you can ask yourself is, as a leader, and this whole kind of front end part isn't just about brand strategy. A lot of it comes down to brand leadership. Can you lead the team? Can you set the tone? Personally, you are going to be, what's important to you as an individual, as the leader of that team, is going to end up kind of becoming important to the rest of the team. So think about the last time you were proud about something, whether that had to do with you, your family, a team member, or conversely, think about the last time you were really ticked off, something that really made you angry. Or think about someone that you really admire, and then ask yourself why. What was it about that situation that made you proud? What was it about what happened that really ticked you off? Or what is it about that person or organization that really makes you consider them a shining example? That will start giving you an idea of what's important to you, and then you just have to put a name to it. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And it also puts it into clarity that it's not about your big hair and your big car, and it's not about your logo. It's about all of these things that you put into your logo that represent what you've created, and that's kind of what's getting clear for me.
Absolutely.
Hey, and Verl, this is Cleve. It can be about your big hair, and it can be about your big car, and it can be about your production, as long as you are okay closing 4 or 5 or 15 or 20 or whatever deals per year. Because the truth is, there's not enough people out there who care about that crap in order for it to attract them. So you have to come up with stuff that's very meaningful. So, you can have a real estate company that is, we are the big haired ladies, and you would have a certain amount of people that would want to work with them. I just don't think it'd be a long-lasting strategy.
Awesome. So, to kind of take that and now put it into practice, you've kind of gotten an idea of what you really want for the organization and your consumer and your client and your team and what's really important. And now how do you start to kind of flip that over to the other side of the coin and put it in a language that will actually mean something to your client or your prospect? And how does that come into play, and how do those values all start demonstrating themselves day to day in a really practical, useful way. And that starts with core competencies, which is, what do you really do? What do you really do? And if you can go back to the other slide just for a second, imagine this. You go to a party, you go to a luncheon, you meet somebody, you know, you sit down, you say, "Hi, I'm John Johnson." They say, "Hi, John Johnson. What do you do?" What do you say? What do you say? If you're like most of us, you say something like, "I'm a real estate broker, I'm a real estate agent, I'm a realtor, I sell homes." And the other person's eyes glaze over and they say, "Oh, look at the time." Okay. That doesn't differentiate you. Okay. And your core competency isn't a business category. It's not a personal title. That's not what you do. What you do is really a summary of your strengths and talents and accomplishments. Okay. And now go ahead and go on to the next slide, because you start to see that there's a natural relationship between what you do and what you want to do. If you're not sure how to describe what it is that you do, let's go back to that brand vision. Let's go back to who you want to be. And now start building some language that simply says, this is what we do. Your mission statement isn't meant to be advertising copy. It's not really for other people. But if what you want to be is an organization that does X, then start talking about X as if you already do it. Anthony Robbins has built an entire enterprise on the concept of modeling. Okay? You become the person you want to be by doing the things the person you want to be would do. So when you start looking at core competencies, we can go ahead and turn the page. Start thinking about all the times you've received recognition, or a compliment, or an award, or a bonus, or a pat on the back, or an attaboy. What are the common denominators of those things that you as an organization or an individual do well? Okay. Over the course of my career, I have run agencies. I've been on the media side. I've been on the client side. But when I look at all the times that I've actually done well, what I really seem to do, the common denominator is I help companies grow. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. As a real estate agent, is start thinking about your areas of expertise. Oh, go back a second. You know, think about your areas of expertise. Think about the most successful client relationships that you've had. And that's really key, by the way. If you want to get feedback from your clients, choose the clients you really like working with, all right, where you've had success, not just in the transaction, but with that sort of person. And start asking yourself, how can you summarize the results of those really great relationships in a more compelling way? For instance, okay, you know, you're not just a personal shopper. You know, if you, let's say you help first-time home buyers move from the city to the suburbs, that's your big deal. That's where you have a lot of success. Well, instead of saying I help first-time home buyers move out to the suburbs, which is true but not very compelling, think of another way, okay, to say that. Maybe what you really do is help young families expand their horizons. And you start summarizing your real strengths in a more emotionally engaging way. And it doesn't have to be a puppy dogs and rainbows sort of thing, but you've got to figure out a way to communicate what you do in a much more interesting way than I'm a real estate agent. Once you've done that, we can move on to the next. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Robert, I just wanted to add something. So you're talking about moving, you know, first-time home buyers from inside of town to the suburbs or whatever it is. I mean, what if your core competency is, hey, you work with us and we'll take away the jitters. Anything that makes you nervous, we'll take care of that. See, that can be huge from a selling standpoint, because everybody who's nervous about moving, they're attracted to your message.
Absolutely it is. You've got to be able to move your core competency or your brand promise or what it is that you really do well beyond simply, you know, we sell your home in the least amount of time at the highest price with the least amount of hassle. If your big deal, and this is just off the top of my head, but if your big deal is you take away the jitters, okay, that's not a very romantic, sassy way of saying it, but maybe what you really do is you make people comfortable with one of the most difficult decisions of their lives, or you help families in transition, okay, deal with moving up to the next stage of their lives, or something like that. That's a core competency. You compare that at the cocktail party to, I'm a real estate agent, And it's much more engaging because the next question is, really? How do you do that? And now you've opened the conversation, you've opened the dialogue, and you get a chance to really get to know that person, and they're interested in getting to know you. So then the next step is to take a look at, if this is what I do, then how do I do it? Okay, and if you go on to the next slide, we start talking about brand attributes, which is really nothing more than your brand personality. Okay, these are the characteristics, the traits that make up how you do what you do, and I will tell you, I think they're the most important aspect of your professional profile, for the simple reason that this is how we choose our partners, not only in business, but in life. If you think about the people that are important to you and the people you like doing business with, it's not because he has great hair or she's a doctor or even he's the #1 agent in such and such town or makes a lot of money. You tend to do business with people because of the way that they are, because of how they are, and because of how they make you feel when you are working with them. So you've got to identify some brand attributes. And if you go to the next slide, I'll give you some suggestions on how you do that. Okay. First of all, by the way, again, another strong correlation between values and attributes. The things that are important to you tend to influence the way that you behave. And you can tell what's important to somebody. Okay, if you are my broker, if you are my manager, I know what's important to you, whether you've ever told me or not, because actions speak louder than words. And there's an old poem in the 50s, called "Children Learn What They Live" or "Live What They Learn." That whole idea of whatever surrounds you tends to influence your behavior, and your values are very much that way. So if you go to the next slide, we talk about how do you choose those? How do you find that? You've got to come up with 3 or 4 adjectives that describe the way that you work. If you asked your clients, what kind of characteristics would they attach to you? I suggest you actually ask them. Actually do that, because there are no bad attributes, okay? There's only bad examples. Someone says, you're opinionated, you're probably more passionate, okay? Someone says you're stubborn, I say you're committed. People tell me you're a horrible gossip, I say you're a prolific networker. So you need to come up with adjectives that describe the way that you do what you do, all right? And then you can move on to brand promise, which is on the next slide. We start taking a look at what's the big payoff. What can I actually expect from you? What's the biggest benefit of doing business with someone like you? And can I get it from anybody else? What can I expect? Go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll talk about the ways you can find that. Again, what would your clients say? Again, I suggest you actually ask them. Then start thinking about, what do you want them to say? What are you willing to, what kind of stake are you willing to drive in the ground? All right. Number 3, take a look at what your top competitors say, and then don't say that. All right, and that happens an awful lot. There's a tendency for us to all kind of take a look at who we're afraid of and say, well, they say this, so we better say something like that too. And then we pile on something else, and we pile on something else, and pretty soon we have cobbled together this Frankenstein message that doesn't even make sense. That's not how you identify your brand promise. Bottom line is, what would you expect from somebody like you? If this is what you do and this is how you do it, okay, then what would be the natural outcome of something like that? What are you willing to promise me? And again, you're not just a personal shopper. Maybe you're not just about helping people make a move. Maybe you're helping people move up to the next stage of their lives, or you're helping them make smarter decisions, or you're helping them make better choices. You've got to figure out a way to communicate what you do in a meaningful, emotionally engaging way. And if you will do that, we can go on to the next slide. You will actually be able to put it all together. And if you take your core competency and your brand attributes and your brand promise, and you simply put those 2 or 3 things in a row, we can go to the next slide, and you start to see the kind of brand summary that you get. You get something like at Acme Realty, we help you expand your horizons. We're positive, passionate, progressive, and productive. And as a result, our clients are empowered to make better choices and enjoy better lives. Now, it's not poetry. It's not necessarily advertising copy, but it becomes the foundation of all that messaging that you put out into the marketplace. And the best part is it's completely authentic because it all started with you and how you are and what's important to you and the way that you work with your clients and your prospects. And now all of a sudden you've got an elevator pitch that really means something to somebody, and it only took you maybe a day, okay, to put together. That's how you set up a brand strategy that will mean something to your prospect and to your client and to your consumer and to people who might want to do business with you and other people who might never do business with you but might refer you to somebody who thinks they'd like to do business with somebody like you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's interesting is you say that, I think a lot of people are going, yeah, I like that one. I like this one. Positive, passionate,
just copy this one.
Productive.
Yeah. By the way, you don't have to have alliteration. They don't all have to start with P's or anything like that. But the bottom line is, it starts to make sense because things go together, and the way that you behave and the way that you do business all has to do with you. Okay? Now you've gone through your brand profile. You've got all these principles. Now you get to move on to things like logos and slogans. All right, but it's all based on the work that you've already done. You know, if you're looking for a tagline, then maybe you just take it right out of that brand summary. Maybe the tagline becomes expand your horizons or better choices, better lives or something like that. But it all drills down and goes back to the homework that you have done, and it is uniquely about you. And now that you have that kind of Magna Carta of the brand, it not only lets you summarize the brand and provide team direction, but it clarifies your position in the marketplace. Everybody understands what it is you own or what it is that you want to own, and most importantly, perhaps, if I'm a broker owner, it standardizes my message. It helps me manage my brand assets. And if you have all sorts of agents who are out running around saying their own thing, chances are it's because you haven't told them what to say. You haven't given them the tools and the resources, okay, to kind of rally around that brand flag. And it's tough to wave the flag if you don't have any patriotism. And the way that you get that kind of buy-in is by letting them participate in this process. And now that you've done that, now in 5 or 6 minutes, we can go through to here are some practical applications. This is what you do with this information. Okay. By the way, I whipped through all this stuff. You're going to get a copy if you want it. You can download the 40-some page workbook that goes through all of this and some more, like brand equity and brand loyalty and brand recognition and so on and so forth. So don't panic. I do want to, however, move on to what's the practical application of all this and how do you really connect and build relationships, hopefully with clients you already have, so that they will rally around the brand. And the next time somebody they know says, we're thinking about moving, they don't just, sit back and listen. They jump up or raise their hand and say, I know a brokerage or I know an agent you have to call. And here's how you do it, okay? First thing is, go ahead and,
Hey, Robert, it's Bill from Imprev. Just got a quick question for you. As you go through this, I'd love your comments as you go through this section of the presentation. You talked about at the beginning some of the unique, iconic brands, McDonald's and Nike and Mercedes-Benz, that really have that brand promise that's very well understood by the consumer. But they also have these massive centralized marketing departments. Obviously, real estate is very different than that, where a lot of the marketing that happens, a lot of the brand communication that happens is coming from the independent contractors that are our agents. So as you go through this, I'd love to get your thoughts on, certainly technologies like ours is a way to, ensure that brand consistency, but how you guide your clients to make sure that because they're not centralized communicators of that marketing brand, how they should make sure that it is reinforced, given that it's a broad community of folks that are talking about them.
Absolutely, and I am very glad you asked, because that's kind of the part that I wanted to move into now. A lot of it comes down, to connecting and communicating with your client, with your prospect, the way that they want to communicate. I'm well into my 50s, and I'll admit I had to get used to the idea that not everybody wants to talk on the phone. I have clients who only communicate now by text or by email, you know, and you've got to have the systems in place that allow you to communicate with them that way. You've got to have brand asset management that allows you to standardize that message across every channel so that you are being consistent, because without that consistency, you're not going to connect, and more than anything else, no one's going to get a clear picture of what you're about. You've got to figure out how to give people the idea that you get what it is that they want, that you think about them often, even when you're not together, and you've got to figure out a way to do that with thousands of people at a time. And I think that's where really awesome systems like, you know, Imprevs come into play. So let's talk about applications in various media. And we're going to be able to do this in just a few minutes, but we talk about all your digital destinations in email, in print, in, you know, community marketing. Let's go ahead and let's talk about starting with websites. Okay. Number one, this kind of messaging not only affects all the not only the text, you know, in your agency sites, but your agency sites have to have resources and tools and apps that actually serve the client. If you're all about helping them make smart decisions, they've got to have those tools. You've got to have blogs. You've got to have reports. Video is the #1 piece of content viewed online now. As of 2 years ago, more people now watch more video online than watch all the television programs on all the cable networks in the world. You've got to have strategic partnerships. You've got to have a really awesome seller section that shows all of the things that you do for your sellers, including all of the print collateral and the brochures and so on and so forth. You've got to have client transaction tracking and so on. You've got to be able to build agent sites, microsites, individual personal branding sites that are in line with your brand, okay, with your broker brand, with your corporate brand, that don't impugn the integrity of that, but allow your agents to build some of their own identity. In email, you've got to be able to truly segment your audience, not just everybody who's bought a home or everyone who's a prior client or everybody who's a seller or a buyer, but all the way down to baby boomers who have kids in college and baby boomers who are about to retire. You've got to have really awesome, truly relevant content. And you can't write all of that. You've got to have a resource for that. All right? You've also got to be able to get all the way down to the one-to-one level. If I want to really customize my message and I want you to get a sense that we have a relationship, then by all means, I've got to be able to send out just one email that's still in line with the brand strategies of the organization. I've got to have awesome print marketing, not just geo-farming for everybody I'd like to get as a client, but what do I do about the clients I already have? What kind of content, what kind of programs, what kind of messaging can I send to them so they get the idea that I think about them often, even when we're not right in front of each other? I've got to be able to do charity programs, special events. I've got to have brochures and flyers and collateral for that. I've got to become kind of the unofficial mayor of my community, and I've got to have all the resources that allow me to send those kind of messages out to prospects and clients and bring them together with me. Most importantly, all of these things that I end up doing end up becoming content for social media, which we all know we're supposed to be doing, but half of us don't do because it's such a chore to go find or create or curate content. If you are doing all of these other things in your email, on your website, if you've got those kind of resources, if you've got those kind of tools, they're all things that you can talk about. And you've got to be able to keep, kind of your peas and carrots separately. If you look at the slide, you can see I've got a personal page, I've got one for my real estate business, I've got one for Company of One, and it's all different content, but it all goes together. And a third of it is all about you as an organization or your clients, and a third might be educational, and the third is all social. What are you doing in the community? What are you doing to bring people together? What's your cause? What's important to you? How do your values come through in the messages that you are sharing through your social media? You start to put all of those things together, and you figure out a way to automate all of that, and you end up giving thousands of people an awesome idea of what you and your organization are really all about in a very personal, one-to-one way. And they don't know it's all automated. They don't know you're doing it to thousands of people at a time. And it's all based on your brand strategy. That's kind of how you build a brand strategy and brand tactics that help you make those connections and build relationships so you can drive referral and you can retain those customers that you have, each of whom can produce 60 grand, okay, and lifetime value. Make sense?
Yeah, Robert, as you've gone through and you've shared with us the thought process, and that it's not just a matter of creating a logo and a slogan that rhymes with who you are. It's really thoughtful in who your customers say you are. Practical application of this, you know, once you've got your brand, if you have the best brand in the world and you've come up with the best values and the mission statement, but nobody sees it, how good is your brand? How do you get it out there? And how would a company like Imprev help you get that brand in the front of the mind of these people that you interact with on a regular basis?
I think it's absolutely critical. You know, as I had just mentioned, you've got to be able to figure out how are you going to connect with people in a meaningful way, but you've got to be able to do that for 1,000 or 2,000 or more people at a time. I think the kind of systems and programs and tools and resources, particularly when you come down to content, you know, and the creative product that Imprev is putting together, it's absolutely critical. You know, obviously I'm not compensated for talking about them this way, but I use it every week. You know, as an agent, I have an Imprev system, and I couldn't run a business without it.
Cleve, your conclusions as you've gone through this brand strategy. Talk to me, if you're still with us, Cleve, about kind of how you bring it all together.
I am. So, and really these are just key points, because as you start trying to implement a brand strategy, you're going to feel a little bit out of place. And you're not going to, you know, all of a sudden decide one day who you are, mention it to somebody the next day, and all of a sudden they're attracted and ready to do business to you. It takes time. That's one of the things that I had to learn. So number one, it's not really about you, about the value you bring to your clients, because really they only care about themselves and their futures. You have to apply your marketing, to be honest with you, longer than you think in order to get consistent results. So one of the issues I had is I'd always come up with a flavor of the month. I'd try it for 2 or 3 months. It wouldn't work. I'd change to something else. But once I started to put consistent messaging out there and apply it on a long-term basis, the results started getting better, and better. Make sure you have plenty of money in your budget is the next item. Put the systems in place to track the success of your marketing and your branding initiatives. If you're spending $1,000 on doing X, Y, Z, and you expect it to produce a return for you, make sure you have a way to measure that. Because if you find that you can invest $1,000 and get a $10,000 return, trust me, we could all figure out ways to apply that more and more. And then consistent marketing and branding, it really can change the trajectory of your business forever. I mean, it can make your business take off, and you can go from doing, you know, $200,000 or $300,000 a year as a team leader to doing $2 or $3 million as a team leader, and it can make a huge difference.
It absolutely can, Bill. As you've gone through and you've talked and you've listened to how Robert and Cleve talk about building their brand, how can you know, I don't know, what comes to your mind about the practical application of that concept?
Yeah, I think a lot of it that keeps coming back to my mind is automation, right? Again, not leaving in the hands of you know, a lot of different folks, a lot of different agents that have a lot of things on their plates that are not going to let them effectively think about the brand promise that you're trying to communicate on a daily basis. So you take control as a broker back to communicate that brand promise and automate the creation, again, of, for instance, all the content that you need to promote a listing. Don't leave that to the agents. Do it yourself. And then push that out as a service to the agents, and you've done it for them. That's a way to make sure brand consistency is always met. And on the flip side, you're going to have agents that love you because you're doing the marketing for them.
I love that, and I appreciate your insight on that as a company that really does help people get their brand in front of their consumers and keep consistency through all those channels. And there's so many channels that we have the opportunity to market ourselves in. Robert, as we kind of wrap up the call today, we've got if there was one thing or there was one piece of advice you would give the listeners today on developing their brand that you really want them to leave with, what would that one thing be?
Understand who you really are. Stop worrying about who you think you're supposed to be, who other people say they are, comparing yourself to that. Take a look at who you really are as an organization, what your real strengths are, and figure out how you can communicate that one-to-one to thousands of people as efficiently and as effectively and authentically, as possible. I think if you have a system like Imprev's, it's going to make your life so much easier. And it's going to help you get to that point where you have that kind of brand recognition so much quicker.
I appreciate that. On behalf of RISmedia, Workman Success Systems, Imprev, our partner in this webinar, Cleve, Gaddis, thank you for being here. Robert, Allan, Paul, you're always amazing. Thanks for sharing so much with us. I wish you the greatest amount of success as you continue to build and promote your brands in the real estate space, and I'll see you out there. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'll talk to you all soon.